The sun blazed mercilessly over the city of San Francisco, casting long shimmering waves across the steel and glass of downtown's financial district. Pedestrians moved quickly under their sunglasses and umbrellas, their minds occupied with meetings, coffee orders, and unread emails. No one noticed the little girl standing near the revolving doors of the Logie Corps headquarters, no one except Ethan Cole. Ethan stepped out of the building just after noon, adjusting his tie and glancing at his phone. His assistant had just texted about the upcoming board meeting. He barely had time to think, as always. But that day was different. A soft voice stopped him mid-step. "Mister, do you have something to eat?" Ethan looked down. A girl, maybe 12, maybe younger, stood with tangled blonde hair falling over her face. Her clothes were oversized, dusty, and torn at the sleeves. She had a backpack that looked like it belonged in a dumpster and sneakers so worn the soles curled upwards. Her eyes, pale and uncertain, stared up at him with a mixture of fear and determination. "I haven't eaten today," she said again, her voice stronger this time. "I just need something. Anything." Ethan usually wouldn't have stopped. He was a man of routine. He donated to charity through his foundation. He avoided getting personally involved. San Francisco had plenty of shelters and programs, that's what he always told himself. But something about this girl, something held him in place. "What's your name?" he asked, not even sure why. "Emma," she replied quickly. Then, after a pause, she added, "But I think my mom used to call me Lily."
The name était like a punch in the chest.
Lily. He blinked, heart suddenly racing. It couldn't be. No, that was impossible. "You said Lily." Emma nodded. "I don't remember much.
Just little pièce.
I've been with lots of people. Some nicer than others."
Ethan was silent, staring.
That name, Lily, was etched into his memory like a scar. His daughter had gone missing over a decade ago. His wife Rachel had taken Lily and vanished after a painful separation. 4 months, Ethan searched. Police were involved. Private investigators. Nothing. The years passed.
Rumor led nowhere.
The only thing left was a single photograph and a birthday he never forgot, August 12th. "I think I used to live in a house with a big red door," Emma said, her voice quieter now. "I'm not sure. I have dreams about it sometimes." Ethan's mouth was dry. He reached into the leather bag slung over his shoulder and pulled out a wrapped sandwich, turkey on wheat, untouched from the catered lunch he hadn't had time to eat. He handed it to her. She snatched it gently, eyes wide with hunger, and sat right down on the concrete, as if her legs had finally given out. She didn't say thank you, not yet. She just unwrapped the sandwich and bit into it like it was a feast. Ethan crouched next to her, uncertain. "Where do you stay?"
Emma shrugged, moodful.
"Here and there. I sleep behind the church on 6th Street sometimes. They don't always chase me off. I sell papers, sometimes bottles." She chewed faster, almost frantic, then slowed herself down, embarrassed. "I used to have money earlier," she mumbled, "but someone grabbed it. Took everything." He noticed the way she held the sandwich like a treasure, how she glanced over her shoulder after every bite, as if afraid someone might take it from her. Ethan's eyes dropped to her left hand. A small, curved scar ran along her wrist, faint but unmistakable. He remembered it so clearly, the day Lily tripped in the backyard when she was just 3 years old. She had been chasing butterflies. Rachel was inside. He was on a call, distracted. The fall left a scar that never quite faded. He had held her in his arms as she cried, blood dripping on his shirt. His breath caught in his throat. It couldn't be. It just couldn't. But the name. The scar.
The eyes.
He reached into his pocket and retrieved his wallet. From a hidden flap, he pulled out the photo, creased and worn from years of being kept close. A toddler in a pink dress smiled at the camera, chocolate smeared on her face, tiny hands clutching a stuffed rabbit. Lily, August 12th, was scribbled on the back in Rachel's handwriting. He didn't show the photo. Not yet. Not without being sure. "Emma," he said softly, "do you remember your mom's name?" The girl hesitated. "Rachel, I think."
Rachel Williams.
His heart stopped. That was his wife's full name before marriage. She looked up. "Do you know her?" Ethan swallowed hard. I did. A long time ago. Emma tilted her head.
What is your name?
Ethan, he replied, barely above a whisper. Her brow furrowed. Ethan.
Cole.
It was his turn to freeze. How do you know that? She pointed toward the ID clipped to his blazer. Your name's on that. He exhaled, relief and confusion blending into a haze. Emma finished the sandwich. Her hands trembled slightly. That was really good. Thank you. You're welcome, Ethan said, watching her every movement. Do you need a place to stay tonight? She immediately tensed. I'm fine. Really? I always figure something out. He nodded slowly, sensing her resistance. He stood. If you change your mind, I'll be here. Around this time tomorrow. Emma looked up. Okay. As Ethan turned to leave, she called after him. Mr. Cole. He paused. Thanks, for not looking away. He nodded once and walked toward his waiting car, but his thoughts were spinning. Could it be? Could fate be that cruel, or that kind? Could Lily really be alive, sitting on the sidewalk outside his building, eating a sandwich like it was her first real meal in days? He didn't know yet. But for the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him, something more than guilt and regret. Hope. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He sat in the leather armchair of his high-rise penthouse overlooking the city, the lights of San Francisco blurring into streaks through the window as fog rolled in from the bay. The untouched scotch on the table beside him had long since gone warm. In his lap lay the old photograph of Lily, the corners fraying, the ink on the back faded but still legible. He ran his thumb over the little girl's smile. He had imagined this moment for so long, seeing her again, hearing her voice, even from a distance. But reality was far messier than fantasy. If that girl was Lily, then why didn't she recognize him? Why didn't she run into his arms? Because you disappeared, he thought bitterly. Because when she needed you, you weren't there. Ethan had built an empire in the years since Rachel and Lily vanished. Logicorp, his tech firm, was now valued in the billions. On the surface, he was the quintessential Silicon Valley success story, sharp, relentless, respected. But beneath the accolades and wealth, there was a silence, one that echoed louder with each passing year. He thought back to the day it all fell apart. Rachel had been vibrant and sharp-minded, but also fiercely protective. Their marriage had started with love but slowly eroded under pressure, his long hours, her isolation, the constant strain of public life. When Rachel walked out, taking Lily with her, she left only a short note, I can't raise her in this world of yours. She deserves more. For months, he tried to track them down. There were credit card traces, sightings in Arizona, a phone ping in Portland. Then, nothing. 1 year later, a car found off a wooded road in Oregon was linked to Rachel. It had crashed into a ravine and burned. Authorities believed no one could have survived. But there were no bodies. No remains. No closure. Ethan had clung to the possibility that Lily had somehow survived. The thought haunted him, yet it also gave him purpose. Until yesterday, when a girl named Emma whispered a name that had nearly broken him, Lily. At 7 the next morning, he called his assistant, Miles. Track down the girl, Ethan said without preamble. There was a brief pause on the line.
The girl from yesterday.
Yes. Her name is Emma. She said she sleeps near the old First Grace Church on 6th. She might still be in the area. Miles, dependable and discreet, had been with Ethan for over a decade. He didn't ask questions. I'll see what I can find. By midday, Miles called back.
I think he found her.
She's near a convenience store 3 blocks from the church, selling old magazines and bottled water from a rolling cart. Ethan didn't wait for further details. He was out the door in under 5 minutes, coat in hand. The streets of the Tenderloin district smelled of heat and exhaust, a strange blend of sour beer, fried food, and city grime. Ethan hadn't walked these blocks in years. His driver usually avoided this part of town altogether. Then he saw her. Emma was crouched beside her cart, her face hidden by a hoodie several sizes too large. She was speaking quietly to an older man who bought a bottle of water and gave her an extra $1. She smiled, but it was brief, guarded. Ethan approached slowly, unsure of what to say. She noticed him before he spoke. You came back, she said. He nodded. I told you I would. Emma stood but kept her distance. I brought something, Ethan said, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a protein bar and held it out. Emma hesitated, then took it. Thanks. I wanted to ask you something, Ethan continued, careful not to sound too intense. Do you still have that paper?
The one with your name on it.
She furrowed her brow.
You mean, the birth certificate?
Yes. Could I see it? She bit her lip, glancing around. It's kind of messed up.
It go tweetons.
That's okay. After a moment's thought, she pulled off her backpack and dug through a side pocket. Carefully, she produced a crumpled piece of paper, folded and nearly torn at the edges. She handed it to him without a word. Ethan unfolded it with trembling fingers. The ink had bled in places, but he could still make out several key details.
Name, Lily Rachel Williams. Mother, Rachel Williams.
Date of birth, August 12th. The father's name had been smudged beyond recognition. He stared at the page for a long time, emotions colliding, shock, pain, cautious hope. Where did you get this? He asked softly. I've always had it, she said.
Marla gave it to me.
She said it was the only thing my mom left when she dropped me off.
Où est Marla?
She used to take care of me. Kind of. We moved around a lot. Sometimes she was nice, sometimes not so much. She said my mom was sick and couldn't keep me. Emma looked down, her voice trailing off. I don't remember much. Just that she said my mom was gone. Ethan folded the paper and handed it back. Emma, I need to know for sure. Would you be willing to come with me to a doctor? Just a simple test.
It won't hurt.
She stiffened immediately. A test. Not a hospital. Just a clinic. We'd do a DNA swab. That's all.
I need to know.
I think you might be my daughter. Emma's eyes darted toward the street, panic flickering across her face. I don't know. You don't have to say yes now, Ethan said quickly. Just think about it. I can bring the kit here if that's better. You don't have to go anywhere. She didn't reply right away. Then she said, I'll think about it. Ethan nodded.
D'être salé point.
He took a step back, giving her space.
I'll be around.
If you need anything, or if you want to talk. Emma folded her arms. Why do you care so much? He didn't know how to answer without choking on guilt. Because I think I lost something a long time ago, he said. And I might have just found it again. She didn't respond. She simply turned away and sat back down beside her cart, opening the protein bar and eating in silence. Ethan walked back to his car slowly, the sounds of the city muffled beneath the roar of his own thoughts. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 3 days later, Ethan stood in the hallway of a private clinic tucked away in a quiet corner of the Mission District. The walls were a neutral gray, and soft instrumental music played from hidden speakers overhead. He hated clinics, hospitals, anything that smelled like antiseptic and waiting. But this place had been chosen for its privacy and its discretion. He checked his watch. Emma was 15 minutes late. Miles, his assistant, sat across from him, typing quietly on a tablet. Ethan appreciated that he didn't ask questions. In all the years they'd worked together, Miles had learned exactly when to talk and when to give space. At 17 minutes past the hour, the front door opened. Emma stepped in cautiously, her hoodie up, eyes darting around the room like a small animal on alert. She held a brown paper bag close to her chest. Her clothes were the same as the day he'd met her, but she looked cleaner. She'd washed her face. Her hair was pulled back with a rubber band.
Ethan stood slowly.
You came, he said. She shrugged. I said I'd think about it. You sure you're okay with this? Emma hesitated, then nodded. Let's just get it over with. The nurse called them in. The test was simple, a cotton swab inside the cheek. Emma winced, but didn't complain. Ethan followed suit. The nurse sealed the samples, labeled them, and promised results within a few days. They stepped outside into the cool afternoon air.
Emma squinted against the sun. You want something to eat?
Ethan asked. She looked at him. Like what? There's a diner down the block. They make good grilled cheese. Emma paused, then nodded once. Okay. The diner was old-fashioned, with vinyl booths and laminated menus. The waitress, a woman with short gray hair and a tired smile, didn't blink when Ethan walked in. Either she didn't recognize him, or she didn't care that the CEO of one of Silicon Valley's most influential companies had just sat down in her booth with a girl in ripped jeans and a hoodie. Emma ordered grilled cheese and tomato soup. Ethan got black coffee and didn't touch it. They sat in silence for a while. Emma fidgeted with a spoon, drumming it lightly against the table. Finally she said, "So if that paper says I'm not your daughter, what then?" Ethan didn't flinch. "Then I'll still be glad I met you." "You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it to make you feel better. I'm saying it because it's true." Emma didn't respond. She stared at the window, watching people walk by. "My mom," she said suddenly, "she used to sing. I think. I remember her voice, but not her face." Ethan's chest tightened. "Rachel sang all the time," he said quietly. "Even when she was doing dishes. Lily used to dance to it." Emma turned to him, eyes narrow. "Was I a good kid?" He smiled, just barely. "You were stubborn. Curious. You loved peanut butter and hated socks.
You used to draw smiley face on the windows with your finger."
Emma's eyes dropped to her lap. "I don't remember any of that." "You were really young," Ethan said. "It's okay." "I remember a red door," she whispered.
And a rocking chair.
Ethan blinked. Their old house had both, a deep crimson front door and a white wooden rocking chair on the porch that Rachel used to sit in during the evenings. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to.
The food came.
Emma ate quickly, as if afraid someone might take it away. Ethan forced himself to sip the bitter coffee. When they finished, he offered to call her a ride, but she refused. "I walk. It's safer."
Taxi don't like going where he stay.
He reached into his wallet and handed her a prepaid phone. "Just in case," he said. She took it reluctantly. "You're really weird, you know that?" "Probably," Ethan replied. Before she left, she looked back.
What if I meurt?
"Lily, I mean." "Then we have a lot of time to make up for," he said. Emma nodded slowly, then turned and disappeared into the crowd. The next 3 days passed like molasses. Ethan couldn't focus on work. He skipped meetings. He stopped answering emails. At night, he found himself staring at the same photograph again and again. On the morning the results were due, he arrived at the clinic before it opened. At 9:04 a.m., the nurse handed him an envelope. He took it to the car and sat in the back seat, staring at the sealed flap. He opened it with trembling hands. The words were technical, clinical. But the conclusion was clear. Probability of paternity, 99.997%. She was his daughter. Lily. She was alive.
Ethan felt everything and nothing all at once.
Relief.
Joy.
Guilt.
Wonder.
1,000 unspoken apologies welled up in his chest, crowding his throat. He called Miles. "I need to find her," he said. "Already on it," Miles replied. "She was spotted near the diner yesterday. I'll send a team to wait nearby."
Ethan gripped the phone.
"When you find her, don't bring her here. Don't make her feel cornered. Just tell her I want to talk. That I have something to show her."
Understood. Ethan hung up and sat back in the leather seat, staring out the window.
She was his. Now he had to find a way to tell her without breaking her all over again. The sun was beginning to dip when Miles finally spotted her. Emma sat on a bench near the edge of Union Square, surrounded by tourists and street musicians. Her hood was down, and for once, her face was still pensive, almost peaceful. She held the prepaid phone in one hand, absently scrolling through nothing in particular, as if trying to convince herself she wasn't waiting for anything. Miles approached carefully, dressed in jeans and a gray hoodie to avoid drawing attention. "Hey," he said, stopping a few feet away. Emma looked up, instantly guarded.
"You're the assistant."
"Miles." "Yeah."
Ethan s'en meut. Emma's eyes narrowed.
"Why?" "He wanted you to have this."
Miles extended a white envelope, the corner slightly bent.
She hesitated.
What is it?
He didn't want to tell you over the phone. He thought, maybe it would be better if you read it yourself. Emma took the envelope slowly. Her fingers shook as she turned it over. She didn't open it right away. Miles waited. Finally, she pulled the flap open and removed the folded letter inside. She read in silence. Emma. Or Lily, if that's who you are. I wanted you to have this, whether or not you decide to see me again. The test confirmed what I already suspected.
You're my doctor.
But more importantly, you're someone who survived. And I want to be worthy of that strength.
I failed you once.
I didn't protect you when I should have. I didn't find you sooner. But if you'll let me, I'd like to spend whatever time I have left making that right.
I'll be at the dinner tomorrow at noon.
Same booth.
No expectation. No pressure.
Just one man hoping to see his little girl again. Ethan. Emma folded the letter slowly and stared into the distance. The buzz of the square faded into white noise. You okay? Miles asked gently. I don't know, she said. He nodded. I'll be nearby, if you need anything. She didn't reply. That night, Emma didn't go back to the church steps. She wandered until her feet were sore, then ended up in a 24-hour laundromat where no one asked questions. She curled into a corner chair and dozed off beneath the hum of dryers. The next day, just before noon, she stood outside the diner. Her heart thudded in her chest, heavy and fast. She stared through the window. Ethan was already there. He sat in the same booth as before, nursing a cup of coffee. A folder sat beside him on the table, unopened. His expression was unreadable. Emma turned away. She walked halfway down the block before stopping. What was she afraid of?
The truth?
Or the fact that she might finally have something to lose? She turned back and pushed open the door. Ethan looked up instantly. Relief passed over his face like sunlight breaking through clouds. He didn't smile, but his posture softened. You came, he said. Emma slid into the booth across from him. I read the letter. I figured. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. A long silence passed between them. Then Emma asked, do you really believe it? That I'm her? I do. But more than that. I feel it. Emma stared at the table.
It feel, Wade.
I know.
What happen now?
Ethan considered the question.
Now, we take it one day at a time.
No rush.
No expectation.
Emma looked up.
What if I'm angry?
You have every right to be.
What if I don't remember you? Elle introduce myself again.
She bit her lip.
What if I leave?
I'll wait.
Emma let out à chaque brise.
Okay. Ethan opened the folder beside him and pulled out a small photo album. He slid it across the table. Emma hesitated, then opened it. The first picture was of a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. The second was a toddler in a backyard, grinning with peanut butter smeared across her cheeks. The third, Ethan holding a little girl in his arms, both laughing, sunlight pouring over them. Tears welled in Emma's eyes before she could stop them. She wiped them away roughly. I don't remember any of this, she whispered. It's okay, Ethan said softly. You don't have to. I'm scared, she admitted. I don't want this to be a dream. It's not, he said.
You're real.
I'm here. Emma closed the album and held it against her chest. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe. But belief, as powerful as it was, didn't erase years of damage. And deep down, she was still afraid of what would come next. That fear surfaced 2 nights later. Emma had agreed to stay in a guest room at Ethan's penthouse, a modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the bay. The room had everything: soft sheets, a desk, books, even a stuffed animal waiting on the bed. But Emma didn't sleep. She paced the floor. Every creak of the hallway made her flinch.
Every shadow on the wall stirred du knees.
Finally, she pulled on her hoodie and slipped out. Ethan found her an hour later, sitting on the rooftop deck, knees pulled to her chest. I couldn't sleep, she said without turning around. He sat beside her. It's too quiet, she added. Too clean. Too much. Ethan nodded. I know. It's a lot.
I don't think you belong here. You belong wherever you are.
She looked at him, her face pale in the moonlight. I keep thinking you'll change your mind. That you'll decide I'm not worth it. That's not going to happen.
You don't know me.
I'd like to, he said, but only if you'll let me. Emma rested her head on her knees. It's easier not to hope. Hope is hard, Ethan agreed, but it's the only thing that's ever made anything better. She didn't respond. He stood to leave, then paused.
You'll always leave the door open, Emma. Whatever you need, whenever you're ready.
She sat in silence as he walked away, her heart pounding with 1,000 questions she didn't yet have the courage to ask. But somewhere deep inside her, a single thought took root. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something real. The next morning, the apartment was quiet. Ethan sat at the kitchen island, absently stirring his coffee while reading a report on his tablet. He had barely slept, too alert, too aware of the presence of someone else in the house after so many years of silence. The guest room door remained closed, and he respected her space. The girl inside, Emma or Lily, was still trying to figure out if this new world belonged to her. He didn't want to push. Miles arrived just after 9 with a folder in hand and a strained expression. I found something, he said quietly.
Ethan put the tablet down.
Go on.
There's a woman. Name is Marla Jennings.
She's been Emma's legal guardian on and off for the past few years, though never officially registered. No state papers, just informal care. She shows up in a few social service records, mostly flagged for unstable housing and suspected neglect.
Nothing that stuck.
Ethan frowned. She took Emma in after Rachel disappeared? That's what Emma told me. But here's the strange part, Marla's claiming that Emma isn't your daughter. She's saying Emma's real name is Emily Torres, that she took her in after finding her abandoned behind a bus station in Modesto. She's threatening to go to the media if you try to steal the girl.
Ethan's eyes narrowed.
Did she provide proof? She sent this. Miles handed over a blurry photocopy of a different birth certificate. It listed a child named Emily Torres, born around the same time as Lily, to a mother named Diana Torres, no father listed. Ethan scanned the paper, skepticism rising. This is barely legible. And the dates are wrong. The handwriting looks altered. Miles nodded. It's questionable at best. Still, if she stirs up enough noise, it could get complicated. Ethan leaned back, rubbing his temples. He had hoped the DNA test would be the end of doubts. Instead, it had opened the door to a different kind of trouble, one that threatened not just Emma's sense of identity, but her safety. Where is she now? He asked. She's been spotted near the old community shelter on 14th. We're keeping tabs. Ethan paused.
Arrange a meeting.
I want to talk to her myself. That may not be wise. I need to hear what she thinks she knows. If she's manipulating Emma, I want to know why. Later that afternoon, Ethan found himself standing outside a crumbling building with boarded-up windows and graffiti-covered walls. The air smelled of mildew and cigarettes. A stray cat darted past his feet as he walked toward the side entrance where Miles said Marla would be. She was already waiting. Marla was in her 50s, her face weathered, her eyes sharp and calculating. She wore a mismatched tracksuit and smoked a cigarette down to the filter. So you're the millionaire, she said flatly, blowing out a stream of smoke. I'm here to talk about Emma, Ethan said. She's not yours, Marla replied without hesitation. I don't know what kind of fantasy you're playing at, but she's not your daughter. I have a DNA test that says otherwise.
Marla's lips twitched.
Yeah? You ever think that test might be fake? Those places print whatever you pay for. I didn't pay for anything. It was done by a licensed private clinic.
Sti doesn't make it true.
You rich types think you can buy truth. Ethan kept his voice steady. Why are you saying this?
What do you want? Marla's eyes flickered.
That girl's been with me for 6 years.
She's mean, one way or another.
I fed her, clothed her, kept her off the street, mostly. You don't get to just swoop in and take her. You exploited her, Ethan said, voice tightening. She's told me about the nights she went hungry. About the bruises.
About you letting stranger around her. Marla's smile vanished.
She's not your property, he continued. And if you care at all, really care, you'll let her decide where she belongs. Marla stepped forward, jabbing a finger toward his chest.
Don't you talk to me about care.
Where were you when she was begging for change outside a gas station? Where were you when she had pneumonia and we had to sneak into the ER because we couldn't pay? Ethan didn't respond. She cried for her mom every night. And you know what I told her? I told her the truth. That people leave. That no one comes back. Her voice cracked at the end, a fissure of emotion breaking through the hardness. Then she looked at him, eyes flat again. You think you're saving her. But all you're doing is making promises you can't keep. Ethan's fists clenched. I didn't come here to fight you. I came to protect her. Marla took a step back, lighting another cigarette with shaking hands. Then you better be ready. Because that girl doesn't need another person walking away. That night, Ethan returned home heavy with thoughts. Emma was sitting on the couch in the living room, legs tucked under her, staring at a cartoon on mute. When he walked in, she muted the TV entirely. You talked to her, she said. I did.
She said you did come.
Ethan sat across from her. She gave me a different version of your past. Emma looked down. She always has one. Depending on who's listening.
Do you believe her?
Emma was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, I don't know who I believe. You don't have to choose today. She says you'll get tired of me. That you'll send me away when you find out I'm not what you hoped.
Ethan leaned forward. Emma, listen to me.
That's not going to happen. No matter what Marla says.
No matter how confusing things get.
I'm here.
I'm not going anywhere.
Emma wiped her nose on her sleeve.
You want to believe you.
Then take your time. She stood and walked to him, slowly, like testing a frozen lake for cracks. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. Would you still care about me, if I wasn't her? Ethan reached out, gently placing a hand over hers. I already care, he said. And nothing will change that. Emma didn't speak, but her shoulders relaxed. She didn't need proof. Not right now. She just needed someone to stay.
The sky over San Francisco hung low with clouds the next morning, casting a grey pallor over the city.
Ethan stood by the window of his study, coffee untouched, watching the mist roll in from the bay. His thoughts were elsewhere, caught between memory and uncertainty. He hadn't told Emma about the birth certificate Marla had produced. Not yet. The girl had already been pulled between too many versions of the truth. He didn't want to add another crack to the fragile surface of her trust. But he needed answers. That afternoon, Ethan drove to a house he hadn't visited in years. It stood on the outskirts of the city, a weathered craftsman-style home with peeling paint and a red front door.
The lawn was overgrown, the porch sagging slightly.
It had been their home, his, Rachel's and Lily's, before everything fell apart. He had never sold it. Couldn't bring himself to. The front door creaked as he pushed it open.
Dust hung in the air like memory.
The furniture was still covered in white sheets. The scent of wood and time pressed in around him. He walked slowly, footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. In the living room, he found the old rocking chair, the one Rachel used to sit in with Lily on her lap. He touched the armrest, the paint worn smooth from years of use. Then he made his way to the attic. The narrow stairs groaned beneath him. He ducked beneath the low ceiling, flashlight in hand, and began to search. Boxes were stacked along the far wall, marked in Rachel's handwriting, books, baby clothes, photos. He opened the last one. Inside were dozens of albums and loose photographs bundled with rubber bands. He flipped through them slowly. Most were from Lily's early years, her first steps, her first trip to the beach, birthday parties with cake smeared across her face. Then he found it. A single photograph, slipped between the pages of an old children's book. On the back, written in faded blue ink, Lily, August 12th. The photo was of a man holding a little girl on his shoulders, her blonde curls wild in the wind, her laughter frozen in time. Ethan studied the child's face. The shape of the eyes. The dimple in her chin. The same small scar on her wrist, barely visible in the sunlight. There was no doubt. He searched the rest of the attic until he found a small envelope, taped to the bottom of a box. Inside was a slip of paper, a lab form from years ago, back when Lily was tested for a rare food allergy. He scanned the page. Blood type, AB negative. The same as his own. And the same as Emma's, according to the DNA report. It was enough. He took the photo and the paper, packed them in a leather folder, and left the house without looking back. That evening, he returned to the penthouse. Emma was curled on the couch, reading a dog-eared mystery novel she'd picked up at a used bookstore. She looked up when he entered. "You were gone a while," she said. "I went to our old house."
Emma blinked. The one with the red door.
He nodded. "I dreamed about it," she said softly. "I didn't know if it was real." It was. He sat beside her and handed her the folder. Inside, she found the photo and the lab report. Her eyes lingered on the image. "That's me," she whispered. "I remember that day. I think. It was windy, and I dropped my ice cream."
You got mad because he cried over it.
Ethan smiled, a lump forming in his throat. "I wasn't mad. I was just trying not to cry with you." She looked up. "I didn't make that up, did I?"
No.
You didn't. Emma leaned back against the cushions, the photo held tightly in her hands. "There's still a part of me that doesn't believe this is happening," she said. "Like I'm going to wake up on the church steps again." "You won't," Ethan said.
You're here now. And you're not alone anymore.
They sat in silence for a long while, the room filled with the soft hum of the city outside. Then Emma spoke again. "Do you think she knew?" she asked. "Who?" "My mom. Rachel." Ethan hesitated. "I think she wanted to protect you. I think she believed she was doing what was best. She left me. She left both of us." Emma didn't answer. She stared at the photo, her expression unreadable. Ethan reached over and gently took her hand. "You don't have to forgive her today.
Or tomorrow.
But you don't have to carry it alone either." She gripped his fingers tightly. That night, Emma moved her pillow and blanket into the living room and fell asleep on the couch while a movie played softly on the screen. Ethan didn't move her. He stayed in the armchair nearby, watching over her as if afraid she might disappear again. For the first time in years, he felt something shift, subtle, fragile, but real. Not closure, but connection. And it was enough. The next morning, Miles brought troubling news. "There's been a leak," he said, stepping into Ethan's office. "Someone told a local tabloid that you've taken in a homeless girl claiming to be your daughter. No names yet, but it's spreading." Ethan's jaw tightened.
Marla?
"Most likely. And she's not done. She's been shopping her version of the story around." "What do we do?" "Control the narrative," Miles said. "Tell the truth before she twists it. Or we stay quiet and hope it fades." Ethan looked toward the hallway, where Emma was laughing with the housekeeper over a spilled bowl of cereal. He wasn't going to let anyone take this from her. Or from him. "Set up an interview," he said.
Something real. Something human.
No corporate spin. Miles nodded. Understood. As he left, Ethan sat back in his chair and stared at the photograph on his desk. The past had nearly swallowed them both. But now, for the first time, they had a future. The day of the interview dawned with unexpected calm. Ethan had chosen a respected journalist, a woman named Karen Lee, known for her empathy and discretion. The plan was simple: sit down in a controlled setting, tell the truth, and let the public see Emma not as a rumor or a scandal, but as a daughter reunited with her father. The interview was scheduled for 3 o'clock at a small media studio downtown. By noon, Emma was nervous. She paced the apartment, pulling at the hem of her sleeves, her shoulders tense. The makeup artist tried to tame her hair, but Emma flinched at the touch of unfamiliar hands. Ethan watched her from across the room, heart aching at how fragile she still seemed beneath her newfound safety. "You don't have to do this if you're not ready," he reminded her gently. Emma shook her head. "No. I want people to know. I'm scared they won't believe it. Or worse, they will, and they'll still find a way to make it ugly." "They won't. And if they try, I'll protect you." She didn't answer, but her eyes softened. At 1:30, Ethan stepped out briefly to take a call from his legal team. Miles stayed behind to accompany Emma downstairs. The car was waiting outside, the driver already instructed on the route and protocol. Everything had been planned meticulously. But plans didn't stop chaos. By the time Ethan returned to the apartment, the hallway was empty. He frowned. Miles wasn't answering his phone. Neither was Emma. Ethan tried the driver next. No answer. A sense of dread prickled at the base of his neck. He called security. Check the cameras at the front entrance. Now. Within minutes, the head of building security called back. Sir, there's footage of a black van parked outside at 1:45 p.m. Your assistant walked out with the girl, but instead of the usual car, they were approached by two men. One of them identified himself as New Transport. Miles hesitated, but then the girl got in. Ethan's voice turned cold. License plate. Obscured. They were prepared. His next call was to the police. Then to Miles's emergency line. 10 minutes later, Miles returned the call, breathless and panicked. They took her. Ethan's stomach dropped. What happened? I don't know how they knew. I thought I recognized the driver. He wore a badge. Said you sent him. I started to question it, but Emma stepped in. She didn't want to cause a scene. She said she'd be fine. I turned around for 2 seconds, and they were gone. Did you get a look at their faces? One of them, yeah. I've seen him before. I think he used to work in construction. Big guy. Tattoo on his left hand, something like a wolf or a dog. Ethan felt the world closing in. He knew exactly who it was. Vincent Malone. 10 years ago, Malone had been a contractor bidding for a multi-million-dollar development deal. His company had cut corners, and Ethan's investigation team had exposed it. Logie Corps pulled the funding. Malone lost everything and filed for bankruptcy. He had threatened Ethan at the time, swearing revenge. Now, he had taken his daughter. The ransom came at dusk. An untraceable email, no return address. Subject, you took everything. Now it's your turn. Inside was a single sentence, if you want her back, come alone. No police. Pier 39. Midnight. Attached was a grainy photo, Emma tied to a chair, her face bruised, eyes wide with terror. Ethan didn't hesitate. He ignored the protests from the police, from Miles, from his legal team. At 11:40 p.m., he arrived at the pier. The wind whipped in from the bay, cold and sharp. The night was quiet except for the creak of boats and the distant hum of the city. He walked along the edge of the dock, empty, harassing. He didn't see anyone at first. Then a voice called out from the shadows. Didn't expect you to come alone. Vincent Malone stepped forward, flanked by two men. He looked older, heavier, but his eyes were the same, bitter, wild. You know why I'm here, Ethan said calmly. Do I? Because last time we talked, you were the reason I lost my home, my business, my family. You ruined me. You ruined yourself, Ethan replied. You cut corner. You endangered lives. He lost everything, Malone snapped. But now you know how it feels. He nodded toward a shack near the end of the pier. Emma was inside. Ethan could see her through the broken window, gagged and tied, her eyes locked on his. You've made your point, Ethan said, stepping forward. Take your revenge. Do what you came to do. But let her go. She's just a kid. Your kid. Ethan said nothing. Malone pulled a gun from his coat. You walk away from this. Everything you have, everything you built, gone. That's the trade. Ethan didn't blink. Fine. Take it. All of it. Just let her go. Malone hesitated. Then, without warning, one of the men beside him moved toward the shack, opening the door. A sharp sound split the air. Police sirens. Shouts. Flashing lights exploded across the dock. Malone turned, cursing. Ethan ducked as officers swarmed the area, weapons drawn. The man holding Emma stumbled, and in the chaos, she broke free, running toward Ethan, screaming through the gag. He caught her just as the police subdued Malone and his men. She clung to him, sobbing. I'm sorry, she cried. I didn't know. I thought they were from your team. I should have said something. You didn't do anything wrong, Ethan said, holding her tighter than he ever had before. You're safe.
You're safe now.
They stayed like that long after the lights dimmed and the chaos settled. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan wasn't thinking about revenge or redemption. He was just thinking about his daughter.
Alive.
And back in his arms. Rain began to fall just after 2 in the morning. It came slow at first, a whisper against the pavement, then harder, until it washed away the last traces of the chaos that had unfolded on the pier. Ethan sat on the back bumper of an ambulance, his coat soaked through, his hands trembling from a mixture of cold and adrenaline. Beside him, Emma was wrapped in a thermal blanket, a paramedic gently checking the bruises on her arms and face. Her eyes were vacant, staring off into the shadows as if still trapped inside them. The police had taken Malone and his men into custody. The officers offered Ethan rides, interviews, paperwork. He waved them off. There would be time for statements later. Right now, all that mattered was the girl sitting next to him. Emma, he said softly. She didn't answer. He crouched beside her, ignoring the sharp pain in his knees.
Emma, quand you hear me?
She turned slowly, her eyes glassy. I thought I was going to die, she said, barely above a whisper.
You're safe now.
They won't hurt you again. She swallowed. You came. Of course I did. I didn't think anyone would. Not really. He took her hand in his, gently but firmly.
He will always come for you.
She broke then. The tears started quietly, trailing down her cheeks. Then they came harder, until she was sobbing against his shoulder, shaking with everything she'd tried to hold in. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, shielding her from the rain, from the night, from the weight of the memory that threatened to bury her. They stayed like that for a long time. The next few days passed in a blur. Ethan brought Emma home, hired a trauma counselor, and cleared his entire schedule. Meetings were cancelled. Appearances postponed. For the first time in years, he was exactly where he needed to be, present. Emma barely left her room. She didn't talk much.
She barely était.
She flinched at loud sounds and kept the lights on even when she tried to sleep. Once, Ethan found her curled up in the corner of her closet, clutching a pillow like a shield. He didn't push her. He sat with her when she allowed it. Read to her when she didn't speak. Cooked meals she barely touched. At night, he sat outside her door, just so she would know someone was there. One evening, nearly a week later, she came into the kitchen while he was drying dishes. She stood silently for a moment, then spoke. You could have died. Ethan turned slowly. Yes. You knew that and you still came. I did. Why? He dried his hands on a towel and stepped closer.
Because you're my doctor. And nothing else matters.
She looked away.
No one est sévère comme forme before. I'm not no one.
She met his eyes. I keep thinking about that moment.
When he saw you running toward me.
I didn't believe it was real. It was. I thought, maybe you'd look at me different afterward. Like I was damaged. I don't see you that way. She hesitated. I see me that way.
Ethan exhaled slowly.
Then maybe it's time we see you together. She looked confused. He gestured toward the hallway.
Come with me.
He led her to his study, where a new wall had been cleared of shelves. In their place hung photos, some old, some newly printed. Baby Lily with her mother.
Toddler Lily on a swing.
And now Emma, eating grilled cheese, reading on the couch, standing by the window with the city behind her. What is this? She asked. Our story, he said. All of it.
The good. The painful.
The real.
She stepped closer to the wall, her finger tracing the frames.
I don't know how to go back to normal, she whispered. We don't go back, he said.
We go forward.
She looked at him. Even with all this? Especially with all this. Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time, they didn't fall from pain. I want to be brave, she said. You already are. She stood silently for a long moment, then leaned her head against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her and held on. Over the next few weeks, Emma began to reclaim pieces of herself. She started therapy. Slowly, the sessions helped her unpack the years of silence, neglect, and fear. She still had nightmares, but they no longer ruled her days. She still doubted sometimes, but those doubts were now met with something stronger: trust.
Ethan never missed a session.
He waited in the car, in the hallway, in the lobby. He was always there when she walked out. They began to build rituals: breakfast together on Sundays, movie nights on Thursdays,
Weekly walks through Golden Gate Park.
At her suggestion, they adopted a dog from a rescue shelter, an anxious Labrador mix named Charlie, who was just as wary of the world as she was. One day, while walking Charlie along the waterfront, Emma stopped and looked up at the sky. "It doesn't feel like I'm pretending anymore," she said. Ethan smiled. "What does it feel like?" "Like I'm allowed to exist." He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Later that night, she found him in the study. "Dad," she said. It was the first time she had called him that. He looked up, startled. She handed him a piece of paper. It was a drawing, childlike but detailed. A red door. A man with graying hair. A girl with wide eyes and a scar on her wrist. A dog at their feet.
Above the door, in uneven block letters, home.
He swallowed hard. "It's beautiful," he said. "It's not finished," she replied. "But I think I know how to complete it now." He nodded, eyes misting. "So do I." A month after the kidnapping, the days had settled into something resembling normal. Emma had started school again, quietly, privately, through a specialized tutoring program that allowed her to ease back into academics without the pressure of a classroom. She spent her mornings at the kitchen table with books and a laptop, Charlie asleep at her feet, and Ethan nearby pretending to read the news while watching her with the awe of a man who still couldn't believe she was there. But there was one thing they hadn't spoken about. Rachel. Her name hung in the air between them, always present but never acknowledged. Emma rarely mentioned her mother. When she did, it was in fragments: an image of her singing, a memory of her perfume, the shape of her handwriting on the corner of an old page. Ethan had tried to keep the past in its place, but he knew better than to think it would stay there. One morning, after Emma had left the room, he opened the locked drawer in his desk and pulled out the file he hadn't touched in years. Inside were newspaper clippings, photocopies of police reports, photographs from the crash site, and the missing persons report filed after Rachel vanished. At the bottom was a single page, added recently, a note from the private investigator Ethan had hired after Emma came back.
Rachel Williams.
Deceased. Death certificate issued 9 years ago. Location: small town clinic, Southern Oregon. Cause: heart failure due to untreated cardiomyopathy.
1 dépend minor at time of death.
Child reportedly disappeared shortly after mother's passing. No formal adoption ever recorded. He read it 3 times. Then he made a decision. That afternoon, when Emma came home from a therapy session, he sat her down in the living room. "There's something I want to show you," he said. She glanced at the folder in his hand. "Is it about Mom?" "Yes." She didn't move. Didn't speak. But her eyes didn't look away either. He handed her the file and waited while she opened it. She read slowly, carefully, absorbing each line with quiet intensity. "She died," Emma said flatly. 9 years ago." "Yes." "She was sick. She never told me. I didn't even know she had a heart condition." Emma looked up. "Why didn't she come back to you?" "I don't know," Ethan said. "Maybe she was ashamed. Maybe she thought I wouldn't want her back. Or maybe she believed you'd be safer away from me." Emma stared down at the paper. She was alone. "Yes. With me." "I'm sorry I wasn't there," he said quietly. Emma closed the folder and rested it on her lap. "I want to see where she's buried." Ethan nodded. "We can go whenever you're ready." 2 days later, they made the trip. The drive to Oregon was long and quiet. Neither of them spoke much, but the silence was no longer uncomfortable. It was filled with thought, with shared breath, with something close to understanding. They stopped once for coffee and again to let Charlie stretch his legs, then continued on. The cemetery was small, tucked behind a white clapboard church on the edge of a wooded hill. The air smelled like pine and old earth. A single caretaker met them at the gate and led them to the grave. It was modest.
A simple stone. Rachel Williams. Loving Mother.
Always singing.
Always strong. 1979-2014.
Emma stood still for a long time. Ethan stayed a few paces back, giving her space. She crouched down eventually, fingers brushing the engraved letters, eyes glistening. I didn't know she was gone, she said softly. I kept waiting. Even when I told myself not to. I still hoped. I know. I used to think she left because of me. She didn't. Emma nodded, but a tear slipped down her cheek anyway. She must have been so scared, she whispered. And I was just a kid. I couldn't help her.
Ethan knelt besider.
None of it was your fault. They stayed there until the sky turned gold with sunset. Before they left, Emma pulled a folded piece of paper from her coat. She placed it beneath the edge of the headstone, weighing it down with a small pine cone. What was that? Ethan asked as they walked away. A letter, she said. I told her about everything.
Det I found you. Det am okay now. Det isti miser.
He didn't speak. He simply reached for her hand. She let him hold it the whole way back to the car. On the drive home, Emma was quiet, but lighter. She stared out the window as the miles slipped by, her fingers tapping gently against her knee in rhythm with the music on the radio. As they crossed back into California, she spoke. She used to sing me to sleep, she said. But after she died, no one sang to me again. Ethan looked at her. Would you like me to try? She smiled faintly. Not yet. But maybe one day. Back in San Francisco, the apartment welcomed them like a familiar embrace. Charlie wagged his tail wildly, leaping into Emma's arms with a joy that only dogs can summon. She laughed, a sound Ethan had waited weeks to hear again. That night, she asked if she could keep the picture of Rachel on her nightstand. Of course, Ethan said. She took the frame gently and placed it beside her lamp. Then, without prompting, she wrapped her arms around him in a tight, lingering hug. I'm glad you didn't stop looking, she whispered. I never could have, he replied. She pulled back and looked at him. I think she would have liked seeing us like this. Ethan smiled, tears in his eyes. So do I. It was a Sunday morning in early spring, and the air in San Francisco had just begun to soften. The breeze that drifted through the open windows of Ethan's penthouse smelled faintly of salt and blossoms. On the balcony, Emma sat cross-legged in the sun, sketchbook in her lap, pencil moving quickly across the page. She had been drawing more lately. Not just people and places she remembered, but things she imagined, moments that never happened, but perhaps should have. Sometimes they were simple scenes, her mother reading a book, Ethan pushing her on a swing, all three of them sitting in a field of tall grass. She called them her maybe memories. Ethan stood a few feet away, sipping coffee, watching her work with quiet admiration. How's the masterpiece coming? He asked.
She glanced up. Almost done.
Can I see? She turned the book around. It was a drawing of their living room, but not exactly as it was. In her version, the walls were filled with pictures. A record player sat on the shelf, music notes floating up from it. The couch was larger, cozier. On it were three figures, Emma, Ethan, and a woman with a gentle smile and wind-swept hair. Charlie was curled at their feet. He stared at it for a moment, then nodded. I think that's exactly how it should be. Emma smiled, closed the book, and stood. They had planned something special for that afternoon. At Emma's suggestion, they were going back to the Tenderloin, the very neighborhood where Ethan had first met her. This time, though, they weren't going alone. They were bringing boxes, full of sandwiches, water bottles, socks, and blankets. Ethan had launched a new initiative through his foundation, the Lily Project, named not for the tragedy of the past, but for the hope of the future. Its goal was simple: reach the invisible children before they disappeared the way Emma had. As they drove through the familiar streets, Emma watched the sidewalks closely. She saw kids who looked like she once had, too thin, too quiet, too used to being overlooked. When they arrived at a small square near the church steps where she used to sleep, they parked and began handing things out. No cameras, no reporters. Just them.
Word spread fast.
Within 30 minutes, the boxes were nearly empty. One boy, about 9, lingered behind after grabbing a sandwich. He looked at Emma curiously. You used to be out here, didn't you? Emma nodded. Yeah. Right over there, by the bench with the broken leg. What changed? She thought about it for a second. Someone saw me, she said. The boy looked confused. People see us all the time. Not like that, she replied. He didn't just see what I looked like. He saw I was real. The boy didn't say anything, but he gave a small nod and walked away slowly. Later, as they packed up the last of the empty boxes, Ethan turned to her. You ready? Emma looked around the square one more time, her eyes catching on the steps where she'd once sat hungry, scared and alone. I am. Back home, as dusk painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Ethan cooked dinner while Emma set the table. Charlie followed them from room to room, tail wagging, occasionally bumping into furniture he still hadn't quite learned to avoid. After dinner, they sat on the balcony, a blanket around their shoulders, watching the city lights flicker to life. I've been thinking, Emma said, about last names.
Ethan glanced au verre.
Yeah. I've had a few, she said. Or none. Or ones that didn't mean much. She paused.
I think you want your.
He blinked. Are you sure? She nodded.
You want it to be official.
I want people to know. And I want to know too.
Every time I sign my name.
Emotion climbed into his throat, but he managed to keep his voice steady. Okay, he said. We'll make it official. They sat in silence for a few more moments. Then Emma asked, do you think she'd be proud of me? Mom, I mean. Ethan didn't hesitate. I think she'd be proud of how you survived. And I think she'd be even prouder of how you're choosing to live now. Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. I still miss her, she whispered. So do I. But it doesn't hurt the same anymore. He smiled. That's healing. Weeks later, the adoption paperwork was finalized. She signed the forms with a steady hand, Emma Lily Cole. They celebrated with ice cream and a walk along the marina, Emma's laughter rising like a song into the cool spring air. She no longer flinched at crowds. She no longer woke from nightmares every night. And though some scars would never fully fade, they no longer controlled her. She had a room filled with art supplies, a bed with too many pillows, and a key of her own to the front door. She had a life. One afternoon, she brought home a copy of the school newspaper. They asked if I'd write something, she said, handing it to Ethan. On the front page, under a hand-drawn heading that read "The Last Sandwich," was her article. She wrote about hunger, not just for food, but for belonging. She wrote about how sometimes all it takes is one moment, one person, one choice, to change the direction of a life. And she wrote about a sandwich, turkey on wheat, that tasted like hope. Ethan read it 3 times. When he looked up, Emma was watching him carefully. It's good, he said, his voice thick. Thanks, she said. It's just the beginning. She was right. It was.